Now, congressional reaction to the closed-door House interview with former FBI Director James Comey. We begin with California Democratic Representative Jimmy Gomez, a member of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee.
Does he refuse to answer any questions?
He's refused to. First, my impression that this is just a complete waste of time. It's occurring right after the midterm elections, where it's a number of days that they no longer going to have the gavels. So I think this is just a last-ditch attempt to try to frame the investigations that are going on and to undermine the investigations. A lot of their questions are trying to lead them down a path to answer specific questions about the investigation of the 3 or 4 people that were first targeted under the conspiracy to collude with Russia regarding Trump's election. So some of their questions are concerning to me because I feel like they're going down a path that they shouldn't be going down, that oversteps the bounds of oversight. I personally believe that we need to ask these questions, but I think that this is not hasn't been done in the right way and has been done at the last minute.
What did you learn about the president's interaction? What did you learn about the president's interaction?
Has said he can't recall key documents in the Russia probe, including the document that opened the probe in July of 2016.
They're being very the FBI is sitting at the table and being very careful to and prohibiting any answering of questions specific with specifically to the.
Is Comey saying he couldn't remember these records?
I can't recall.
Do you learn anything about the president's interactions with James Comey that led to the firing and the president's discussions with James Comey about specifically the Michael Flynn investigation?
We did not get into that just yet. A lot of the questions were about were focused on kind of the bias of some of the FBI agents. That's what the Republicans were focusing on. We also started trying to figure out that's a lot of their questioning was based on that. What kind of bias should have these FBI agents, as you know, heard their names before, Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, been involved with some of the actions that the FBI has taken so far?
Did he say the text messages were indications of bias?
He did not. He said that there always has to be a question of appearance of bias. And that's something that he kind of stressed. Appearance is something that is taken into consideration, but he was talking about a lot of different hypotheticals.
Did he acknowledge any mishandling of the Clinton investigation or the Russia investigation in 2016? Did he acknowledge doing anything wrong?
Nothing that you haven't heard before. We pushed him on the fact that it seems that he treated the Hillary Clinton investigation differently than the Trump investigation, and he says that he wouldn't have made any. He wouldn't have done a different decision, but that's what he kind of came away with. But he does understand that it had big implications.
He said he wouldn't have done anything differently?
No.
Is there anything he didn't answer that you were surprised he wouldn't answer?
No, actually, I haven't seen anything I'm surprised that he didn't answer. He's been pretty forthcoming, unless the FBI itself stepped in and said he couldn't answer that question.
How often did that happen, Congressman? That the FBI counsel would step in and say don't answer?
Not too many, maybe 4 times. The FBI really didn't step in. When the Democrats were asking the question so far, they haven't interfered once.
Is there any discussion of leaks about details of the Clinton investigation or the FBI or the Russia investigation during the campaign?
I can't remember. I was paying attention, but I can't remember.
He said the Republicans were focused on bias, potentially, with FBI agents. So what were the Democrats focused on in your guys' line of questioning?
I was focused on taking the track regarding bias. If bias is such a big deal, let's look at the questions regarding Bill Barr, who basically said he already wanted to reopen an investigation, or that there would be justification to reopen an investigation of Hillary Clinton and her time as Secretary of State. Also that he was a Trump supporter. So I focus on that line of questioning, because if it's all biased, then what responsibility does Bill Barr, if he gets nominated and he becomes the Attorney General of the United States, have to recuse himself, even if there is appearance of bias?
And how did Comey respond?
He said that we need to make sure that any appearance of bias that we move away from it, and that Bill Barr, if he determines that there has been an appearance, should probably step away from the investigation.
Say that Bill Barr determines himself that there's that he's biased towards the Mueller probe, he should step aside.
But he also said that he has a lot of respect for Bill Barr.
To be clear, is this another case of another attorney general that this president is nominating having to recuse himself from the investigation?
We'll see what the Senate asks, but I think it might be.
Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Back against the wall, please. It's Congressman Jimmy Gomez, California 34, Oversight Committee. Thank you, guys.
I beg your pardon. Do you mind stopping?
I'll be glad to stop now. What do you want to talk about?
I'm just So what's your reaction? What's the meeting there?
You know, really, we're just going on with the questions at this particular time. We're continuing to ask a number of questions. We're about to enter into our second phase of majority asked questions of Director Comey. Those, I think, will really build on the foundation that was offered in the first hour, but to talk any specifics, we've agreed not to do that. Hopefully, at the end of the day, we'll be able to comment on that.
Have you learned anything new, sir?
Obviously, we have learned a few things that are new, and your follow-up question, I can't tell you what that is, but yeah, there's been new information that's been gathered, but we're really at the beginning stages of this transcribed interview, and the next 2 or 3 hours will build on that foundation.
Do you think there'll be a second day of questioning?
I don't know whether it's too early to tell whether there will be a second day of questioning. I do know there are a number of questions that we have pages and pages of those, and yet at the same time, if we make good progress, we could potentially wrap it up today, and I think that decision is going to be made around 4 o'clock today.
One logistics point, we're going to make this our primary camera for you all to come out if you could tell the others.
Yeah, I think that's been communicated 3 or 4 different ways just a few minutes ago. Okay.
Come out if there is an agreement to extend.
I think the transcript that will come out, we are going to try to make the transcript available from today in 24 hours. So it would be Saturday, yes. Yeah.
Thank you. Everyone's working for the weekend.
First of all, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, member of the House Judiciary Committee, just left the room where the Oversight and Judiciary Committee are questioning Director Comey. Before I start, let me acknowledge Pearl Harbor Day and to thank the men and women of the United States military, and certainly in that tragic day to acknowledge the heroes who are fallen. We honor them for their sacrifice on behalf of the democracy of this nation and the rule of law. I hope in the 116th Congress that the committees of oversight will focus on the rule of law, and that their work will not be frivolous. It will be to restore the strength of law enforcement, the protocol and practices that are appropriate with the Department of Justice, and to be able to clean up corruption in this nation. This was, again, a frivolous attempt by Republicans to drag old investigations into the limelight. In the words of Director Comey, he is sitting in the darkness, for as you well know, he asked for this to be a public hearing, which we believe it should. And so in 24 hours, the full transcript should be released to the press, which we demand, of course, as he did, and he will be able to speak. But what I have ascertained in my questioning is that there is no doubt that there was nothing of substance to former Secretary Clinton's email investigation. And as much as Republicans continue to ask repeated questions over and over again, the director is confident and comfortable with the original decision. We persisted in a line of questioning that I think has disturbed all of us without any casting of disrespect to the director, is the timeline of announcements prior to the 2016 election. It is clear that this was an election of the leader of the free world. For this to be the election of the leader of the free world, I think much, if you will, caution should have been taken. And from my questioning, I have ascertained that upon reflection, a better approach could have been taken. consultation with the Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General, a holding of the announcement until there was an actual determination that we were not seeing redundant emails. I only say that to say is that all of us who are in an investigatory mode have to be particularly astute and clear that when we move or present, that we present it in a manner that has the least amount of negative impact to the rule of law or to the rights of the individuals involved. In questioning about the IG report, again, I emphasize that I think it would have been important, or when I say emphasize, the report emphasizes that there was no evidence that the FBI delayed in its investigation of the laptop that was found in the fall of 2016, that they didn't dilly-dally around, but that there was a better approach to announcing that laptop, announcing it in the window that it was announced, and as well as to whether or not it had to be announced at that time, even though the director felt a burden that he would be accused of concealing. I think the other point is a letter to Congress that had 16 names on it was clearly an announcement of a national proportion. It was going to be broadcast, and that's what happened. There were those on that letter that had an element to undermine the election, and they just were given a gift to do so. Finally, I would make the point on the question of obstruction of justice. It has now been proven, as relates to Director Flynn, that there was certainly the right concern by the FBI in its initial investigations prior to the Mueller investigations, and that the President, in his very conspicuous questioning to lay off of Director Flynn, certainly may have been on the brink or in actuality obstructing justice. The President's comments as interviewed by a national news host said it was a Russia thing. And so as we gleaned in the reporting or the questioning of Director Comey, I think what I would say is that he was cautious to not attribute those as final words, because as everyone knows, the President has now come forward with a number of other additions and addendum to say why Director Comey was fired. But I think it is clear that his first words, which we put on the record, it was a Russia thing, his first impression, it was a Russia thing, speaks to the obstruction of justice issue in the firing of Director Comey. This is obviously now in the hands of the Mueller investigation, but I don't think we have gleaned any more rocking substance other than throughout the 2-year period that we have been engaged in any interaction between the DOJ, Mr. Comey's firing, the subsequent writing of a memo of what the firing was about by the Deputy Attorney General, and then the extensive Mueller investigation, that we have a crack in the system of the Constitution and the rule of law, and we have to urgently go toward the next Congress to do the investigation in a thoughtful manner. Right now, I don't believe we've gleaned any new information that can move this committee forward under the present leadership that we have right now.
Congressman, Director Comey in the past has stopped short of saying that he believes that there's been obstruction of justice. Did he go any further in his comments today about whether the President obstructed justice?
I think he stayed consistent in his perspective, and he based it upon the fact that the President has walked back his comments about the Russia thing. My question was that in his expertise as a law enforcement officer, isn't it typical for a witness to walk back? His astute answer to that, some witnesses. So I would just say that he has stayed consistent in that. We were concerned that this obstruction of justice had national security ramifications. I still believe it does because it was broadcast internationally that a President of the United States was engaged in saying things that might be taken by adversaries and allies, that we were playing with the rule of law, and that actions with foreign adversaries were actually impacting on the election. But he did not see to the point that it was, at least as I heard, a national security impact based upon the facts need to be brought out by the Mueller report. And he's absolutely right, and we're all going to wait on that. But I would say that if you were in, these are my words, if you were in a meeting with the Russian ambassador and subsequently saying it's been taken care of or will be taken care of, it is not only to me a rule of law violation, but it is frightening. But in any event, he stayed consistent with his perspectives on the obstruction of justice issue.
Can you expand on Director Comey's comments as it relates specifically to this question of whether William Barr should have to recuse himself from overseeing the Mueller probe if he becomes Attorney General?
Well, I think he was cautious in those remarks, and I think that what transpired was a respect for the nominee.
Now, you're also criticizing how Republicans are handling this type of oversight. Is Director Comey an important witness for when Democrats are in the majority next year as it relates to the oversight you intend to conduct of the president and these questions around obstruction of justice?
I can only say that we have a responsibility in this Congress to do what the American people have asked us to do, protect their health care, build on the infrastructure and education. When it comes to oversight, we're going to be thoughtful, and we will certainly solicit witnesses that will help us restore the integrity in the government and to reinforce democracy.
Congressman, when it's all said and done today and this transcript comes out, are we going to learn anything substantively new, or are we going to look back at this as a purely political exercise?
Well, the media is always an astute architect of review, and I would imagine that you might see some interesting pearls of wisdom. But remember, this was about Secretary Clinton's emails, and there is no walking back, that there was no basis of prosecuting the former Secretary of State as relates, no criminal prosecution as relates to the email saga. That's what we were allegedly gathered here for. The issue of obstruction of justice, there may be a number of nuances that you will see, and maybe the next leg will generate something. But I can say that Director Comey was consistent and steadfast in his original decision. I think the issues around how it was done can always be reviewed or assessed.
When did Democrats use their time to focus on? Did they also probe the Hillary emails matter, or was it largely about obstruction?
We were well versed with a number of members, and we covered the gamut. We covered a wide range of issues, and the ones that you just mentioned, we covered that. Again, this is we realize that this is a very serious historical journey that we're taking. If you go talk to an American right now, their eyes and their minds, their hearts are on many different things. But we govern here on the basis of today, but also the historical reach that is going to occur. And so when we begin to look back on this period, I wanted to be clear, Democrats wanted to be clear that we were thorough in our questioning, but that we got nothing from it. And that there is no reason to jump up on the Secretary's emails. That is a finished case.
He said he labored over the decision to reopen the investigation in 2016. Is that what?
He felt compelled. I think you've seen the Inspector General. His emphasis was he did not want anyone to suggest he had concealed a major element that might impact anyone's presidency. And I believe him to be truthful in that representation. I think the issue was who else should have been at the table.
Has your opinion about how the FBI behaved before the 2016 election changed based off of this area?
No, I think best practices, upon reflection, that'll be a responsibility of the House Judiciary and the Senate Judiciary Committee. We don't tell the DOJ how to act, but let us follow protocol. And protocol has traditionally been law enforcement presents a case and prosecutors determine the case. And in this instance, prosecutors are Attorney General, and I think that's who should have been making the comments. Again, that's my opinion.
One thing we hear often from Democrats is why was it that in the case of one candidate that an ongoing investigation was made public before the election, and yet an investigation launched into connections between the Trump campaign and the Russians launched before the election was not known until after? Is that something Democrats specifically posed to Director Comey?
We're very concerned about that, and that question did come up, and my recollection is that one was in one context of level of investigation, and one was a little bit more completed or at final point, and therefore had to respond to the American people. My view of it is that it should have been a dual reporting. That's a view, but that is something that's worth looking at in terms of protocol, rule of law, DOJ practices. Obviously, the DOJ is an independent executive body, but we in the Congress should look at protocols on how best to respond to the need of the American people for information and also to ensure democracy. Let me be very clear. I said it over and over again. This was an election for the leader of the free world. It is looked upon as one of the most important elections that are held in any nation around the world. We owed a great deal of veracity, integrity, but also fairness.
Do you have any comment on the Manafort and Cohen filings that are supposed to come down today from the special counsel's office?
I think that is going to be a crucial document that will probably generate into review in 2019. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Comey announced he's agreed to return for another interview on Monday, December 17th.
Director Comey, will you take some questions on the way over? Will you be coming back?
Mr. Comey, come to the mic. Right here. Right here, guys. Scoot back, please. Scoot back. Let Mr. Comey come to the mics.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was going to try and sneak by you, but I thought you might notice me.
A little back. Please, a little back. I can't walk these things.
Okay. Yeah. I'm coming back. We've scheduled a date to come back on the 17th after a full day of questioning. Two things are clear to me. One, we could have done this in open setting. And two, when you read the transcript, you will see that we're talking again about Hillary Clinton's emails, for heaven's sake, so I'm not sure we need to do this at all. But I'm trying to respect the institution and to answer questions in a respectful way. You'll see I did that in the transcript. You'll see that if you get a transcript of my return visit, which I think will be week after next. And then this will be over.
Director Comey, you served in the Southern District of New York when the new Attorney General nominee served as Attorney General the last time. Do you have confidence that he can act with impartiality if he's confirmed to this new post?
I like and respect Bill Barr. I know he's an institutionalist who cares deeply about the integrity of the Justice Department. So I'm sure he'll use the standard career resources he has to judge what he should be involved in and what he shouldn't be involved in. But Bill Barr is a talented person who was a good Attorney General the first time. I liked him very much then. I think he'll serve the Justice Department well.
But there's a question about whether he should recuse himself from the Mueller probe.
Yeah, and I'm sure he'll talk to the career officials about how to handle that.
How extensively have you cooperated with the Mueller investigation at this point?
I can't talk about that.
Have you talked, Director Comey? How many times have you spoken?
I can't talk about that. I mean, I could, but I won't. I'm sorry.
Director, the Republicans came out and said that a government lawyer sort of ran interference and shut down specific lines of questioning. Did that happen? And if so, what topics were not discussed?
When you read the transcript, then I think you will not see that happening.
Same end. I mean, are there specific topics that you still feel like you can't discuss from your time as FBI director, and you've been out the door for a year and a half now? What can't you answer?
Well, the FBI, for understandable reasons, doesn't want me talking about the details of the investigation that is still ongoing. It began when I was FBI director, and so it makes sense that they don't want me going into those details, but that's a very teeny part of what we talked about today, a whole lot of Hillary Clinton's emails, which will bore you.
You said
Is there
you're
a
okay with
possibility that the next time the hearing will be public? Is there any talk of that?
There wasn't any talk of it. I think they want to do it the same way. I wish it were going to be public, but I think we're going to have to do it the same way again.
You said you were okay with the Barr nomination itself. Did you have any concerns about the firing of Jeff Sessions and the president continually going after Jeff Sessions for not recusing himself from the Mueller investigation?
I think the president's attacks on the Justice Department broadly and the FBI are something that no matter what political party you're in, you should find deeply troubling and continue to speak out about, not become numb to attacks on the rule of law.
But with the firing of Sessions specifically, did you have
That's not something I can comment on.
Director Comey, can I ask you a question
Yep.
on FISA abuse? It's a major issue for the Republicans. Did you have total confidence in the dossier when you used it to secure a surveillance warrant and also in the subsequent renewals?
I have total confidence that the FISA process was followed and that the entire case was handled in a thoughtful, responsible way by DOJ and the FBI. I think the notion that FISA was abused here is nonsense.
As a private citizen, how do you think Bob Mueller's investigation is going?
As a private citizen, as someone who knows the justice system, I see it proceeding incredibly quickly and very, very professionally. The most important indication of that is you don't know anything about it except when he files something in court, and that's the way it should be.
Are you prepared to return next year when Democrats regain control of Congress to testify perhaps on the questions of obstruction of justice in an impeachment case?
I always want to respect the institution of Congress. I'd love it if they didn't want me to testify, but if they want me to testify and we can do it in a responsible way, I will abide it. So we'll see what happens.
Do you know anything about Rod Rosenstein wearing a wire? Did that ever come up in any of your discussions when you were there?
Yeah, I can't comment on that. All right, all enjoy your weekend.
One more here. Mr. Comey, through, please. Enjoy your weekend. One more, please.
Yeah, I saw somebody tweeting out a secret picture from inside there.
That's it, there we go. But you thought that they pretty much held to the order of the day?
I think so, by and large, yeah.
Somebody got under my foot. Young lady got under my foot.
How you doing, bro?